Welcome to my channel. A dad shot and killed at a birthday party in front of his own children, in what police believe was a cold, organized execution. A prime suspect who'd already stood trial for murder 3 times and walk free every single time. Encrohat messages. International man hunts extraditions across Europe and Africa. CCTV and dashcam footage piecing together a complex, chilling investigation. The biggest question remained, who really killed Robert Powell? It was a birthday party in Roydon, Essex, held on the 12th of June 2020, which was being hosted by 50-year-old Robert Powell, known to his friends as Fox. Robert was well known in the music business, where he managed musicians. As the party drew to a close about 4:45 a.m., Robert and his 2 sons left the party. But as you can see from the CCTV, a Ford Cougar was in the vicinity, and this car stopped near Robert. And then one man stepped out of the car, and in 10 terrifying seconds shot Robert 8 times in front of his 2 children. One shot passed through Robert and hit 2 young women nearby, with one being shot in the foot and the other in the leg. It was by pure luck that they were not seriously injured. Robert was rushed to hospital, but his injuries were too serious and he could not be saved. And he died the next day for Robert's family. This was another devastating tragedy. His sister and dad had recently died, and his brother Wayne, a 39-year-old DJ, was shot dead in Chingford, northeast London, by a lone gunman in July 2010. At the time of his death, his partner was expecting their baby, and as I record this in April 2026, his murder remains unsolved despite a £20,000 reward. For the police investigating Robert's murder, it was clear straight away that this was no random attack. It was a targeted execution, and they immediately began an investigation to find out just who may have wanted to kill Robert and why. But there was a major problem, and that is that not a single person present at the party or who had witnessed the shooting were happy to provide a witness statement, which said, "I think a lot about the nature of the attack and the person or people likely to be responsible." But by using mobile phone records, CCTV, vehicle tracking, and using intelligence, the police felt they were soon able to figure out just what had happened and who was responsible. What did help was that this is yet another case where the suspects had freely used the Encrohat system, which gave investigators access to all the top-secret messages sent by the criminals, and that was key to this case. This investigation is a good example of how modern cases can be built by layering intelligence together, rather than just relying on a single smoking gun piece of evidence. So, let's look at some of the aspects of the investigation, and how that led to the suspects being identified and a case against them being built. 3 cars were used by the gang who murdered Robert. The Ford Cougar, we've heard about, a Toyota Prius, and a Vauxhall Sapphira, and all were captured by dashcam footage approaching the location of the party in convoy, and then by CCTV leaving the scene after the killing. The Ford Cougar and the Prius used in the murder were later traced to an industrial estate in nearby Epping. The man linked to the Cougar and believed to have killed Robert was 44-year-old drugs dealer Nana Apong, who was no stranger to law enforcement. Through Encrochat, detectives could see that in May 2020, Apong began monitoring Robert Powell's whereabouts via spotters and social media so that he could find him and kill him. He clearly had a grudge against Robert, but quite what that was held for wasn't clear at this stage. And just a week before the murder, one of Apong's spotters notified him that Robert was at a party in East London after monitoring his social media accounts, writing, "That's where he is, bro. You need to see his social media. He's advertising himself." Nothing happened on this occasion. But when Robert announced the birthday party he was hosting on June the 12th-13th in Roydon on Instagram and invited people to come along, this alerted Apong's gang, and the planning began about how they were going to kill Robert. The Prius belonged to another of the gang, 39-year-old Isra Shah, and this was recovered from his home address in the days after the shooting. It is thought that the Prius was selected as it was hoped that Robert or anyone else passing would just naturally assume it was a taxi. It's that sort of car, isn't it? And when Robert emerged from the party, one of the occupants of the Prius, which was parked outside, alerted Apong in the Cougar, who then made his way towards Robert, got out of the car, and killed him. The gang then made their getaway at speed, whilst the horror of their actions played out on the rural streets of Roydon. After the murder, messages involving Apong and Shah and another member of the gang, Tetop Adena, were accessed by detectives. This clearly showed that Adena, a close associate of Apong, met up with Shah, and Apong traveled to the party and then was in contact with Apong in the hours both before and after the murder. Their messages included a discussion about a specific type of 9mm ammunition, the same type that was used in the gun for Robert's killing. But a year after the murder, the three main suspects, Tetopia Dana, Nana Apong, and Isra Shah, still hadn't been caught. We've all believed to have left the country soon after the murder. But detectives were determined to get justice for Robert and his family, and Apong featured in an NCA Most Wanted campaign to hunt 13 fugitives, thought to be hiding in Spain. And he was made the subject of an Interpol Red Notice, which alerts police worldwide, and he should be arrested on sight if spotted. And this brought success with Shah found in a hotel in Malaga in Spain, and he was extradited back to the UK. For me is cool, times 2 minutes to that, you're under arrest. For first instance, one relating to the murder of Robert Powell. Then in September 2022, the authorities also managed to catch Apong. He'd been in Spain but made the crossing to Morocco in the back of a lorry using a fake Mordacy passport and then was intercepted at Tangier port. The magistrates at Chase Fordwood Magistrates Court have issued a warrant for your arrest, and that's in relation to a murder. Possession of a firearm with intent to endanger life and wounded with intent. Oping denied any involvement in Robert's murder despite the evidence against him. And when you look back at his criminal record, it's easy to see why he was confident of not being found guilty of the murder. So far in his 44 years, he led what seemed to be a charmed life in court, having been found not guilty of murder on 3 occasions. Let's briefly look at these. The first home was in Plaster, East London, just before Christmas in 1999, when Apong was just 21, and he was accused of the murder of Jeremiah Oki. In March 2021, Apong walked free from the Old Bailey after being acquitted. Nobody has ever been convicted for the murder of Jeremiah. Apong was 30 inches May 2020, and he booked the Sugar Lounge nightclub in Forest Gate, East London, to celebrate. And what happened next was described by the Evening Standard's court reporter as, "A quiet Forest Gate Street was turned into a scene from a Quentin Tarantino film." 2 men were shot dead outside the venue, and Apong and his friend Michael Smith, who was also shot, face murder charges. Smith was found guilty and sent to prison for 34 years. Apong, who faced 2 murder trials again, left court acquitted of murder. It was 2 years later that Apong was facing another murder charge after another all-night party at a venue in Dagenham, East London. It was the early hours, 5:35 a.m., when a ruck started, and 2 5-year-old Ashley Laddie died after being punched, kicked, and stabbed by a group of men. 2 of Apong's friends were sent down for murder, but Apong was again acquitted of the murder charge and was sentenced to 4 years in prison for grievous bodily harm. So now, Apong alongside Shah faced a 4th charge of murder. And at the trial, both Apong and Shah denied the charge. The court heard that Shah accepted he was at the scene of the party in his Toyota Prius with another man still wanted by the police, Teta Bena. But he said this was just to deal drugs, and he denied that he was involved in the murder. Apong, he totally denied any part in the murder and said he was not even in the location when Robert was shot. I should say that during the course of the trial, the jury were not told of the 3 times in the past when Apong was accused of murder and walked free from court. I've spoken to people in the court for that trial, who all say that Apong was a very credible witness. The day of Robert's murder was, coincidentally, the day that customers of EncroChats were informed that the system had been compromised and they were advised to wipe and destroy devices using it. Ung explains that he fled to Spain and had nothing to do with Robert's murder, and was simply because his drug-dealing operation, which he admitted, had been exposed by the Encroat hack. It sounded credible. Apong claimed that on the night of the 12th-13th of June 2020, he'd gone to a party in Redbridge, East London, and had arrived back in his house in Wooping in London's Docklands at about 4 a.m. He reacted really well under cross-examination, and many in court feared that his luck would hold, and he would yet again be found not guilty. But on this occasion, the jury found Apong and Shah both guilty of murder. In a victim impact statement, Robert's sister, Jennifer, told of the effect on Robert's frail mom, saying, "I see her listening to old voice messages she has from him on her phone. This makes me feel so sad. She shouldn't have to go through this." Jennifer said her brother was the life and soul of any family get-together. He would come into the room, she said, and everyone would take notice. She continued, To the two people who have been convicted of Robert's death, we still have so many unanswered questions. The main one being, why did you do this? What did you achieve? I haven't seen any remorse from either of you throughout this trial. I only hope, as you spend the best years of your life in prison, you come to realize the implications you've had on mine, my family's, and even your own life. Opon was sentenced to life in prison and told he would serve a minimum of 38 years. Turning to Opon, the judge said, "You, Mr. Opon, were probably the gunman, but I cannot be sure whether you instead remained in the Cougar, but it makes no difference to sentence. From all I've seen of you and heard about you, you are an extraordinarily dangerous man." The judge turned next to Shaw and jailed him for life for minimum of 26 years before he could be eligible for parole. The judge told him, "You were brought into this plan late, and you may have played a role as a useful idiot. You won't be surprised to hear that both killers showed no emotion as they were led from the dock to start their sentences." Dear Stephen Jennings of Essex Police's Serious Crime Director said afterwards, "This murder was unusual in its level of sophistication, organization, and brutality. Opon is a committed and high-lay criminal, and thought he could use his knowledge of law enforcement tactics and encrypted messaging to evade justice. He refused at every turn to accept any responsibility for his actions in arranging this killing. Shaw, he lied about his presence at the scene, telling the jury he was there to deal drugs. Thanks to the evidence we gathered, the jury saw through this lie. These sentences do not mark the end of our investigation. We know, and the evidence is clear, that others were likely involved in Robert's murder, and we will continue to work to see them identified and arrested." And true to the word, the other main suspect in this murder, Tetopi Adena, was caught in Spain in May 2024 and extradited to the UK, where police arrested him at Heathrow Airport. Now, back on British soil, there's been a warrant issued by Chance's Court in relation to the murder of Robert Powell. So therefore, I'm arresting you under that warrant suspect murder. You don't have to say anything, but it may have been defense to mention when questioned. Anything you do say may be given evidence, and the time is 2043. Like Shaw, he admitted being at the scene of the killing, but claimed he was there to sell drugs. Adena had 9 previous convictions and was still on license, having been convicted of supplying Class A drugs when Robert was killed. At the trial, his QC suggested his client didn't know that Opon was carrying a loaded firearm at the scene, and later told the court that Adena was recruited late to the operation, adding, "He didn't actually get out of the vehicle, he was just muscle." On the 13th of November 2025, which, if he'd been alive, would have been Robert Powell's 56th birthday, the jury cleared him of the more serious charge of murder, but found him guilty of manslaughter. And for this, he was jailed for 19 years. So there we have it, 3 men behind bars for the murder of Robert Powell, and the police still believe at least 2 others involved are yet to be convicted. If he's ever released, Opon will be at least 80 years old. And what really hits me in this case is Shah, described as a useful idiot by the judge. And he's thrown his life away, hasn't he, for an argument that wasn't even his. As always, our thoughts as we finish with the friends and family of Robert Powell. Thanks so much for watching this video today. Please do like and subscribe.